All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of A Sip of Knowledge with Marty Duffy, Lou Bryson, and Liz Rhoades, plus this week's special guests, Nora and Adam from Lost Lantern Whiskey. I'm going to let your hosts, I think it's Lou this week, who's going to be giving a little extended formal introduction in just a second. But before we get to that, as always, I'm Will Hookinga from Zavvy.co and just want to point out a few ways that you can interact with one another, send in questions and things like that throughout the show today. So on your right, you'll see a chat box. Feel free to say hello. Let us know where you're joining us from around the world. And like I mentioned before, if you do have a question at any point for our hosts, for their guests, there's a little button at the bottom of the screen that says ask a question. So just click that button, type your question in. I'll be keeping an eye out for those throughout the show. And last but not least, feel free to invite any of your friends to join us. There's a share button at the top. Makes it really easy to do that. But yeah, that's enough from me for the rest of the hour. Liz, Marty, Lou, I'll turn things over to you now.
Hey, thanks there, Will. Hey, by the way, I went to the doctor on Friday. I had a bunch of tests done and didn't hear back from him until this morning. He calls and says, yeah, Mr. Duffy, I have some bad news and some worse news for you. I go, oh, my God, bad news and worse news. What's the bad news? And he goes, you got 24 hours to live. And I go, what? What could be worse than that? And he says, I was supposed to call you yesterday. So I might not be on the show next week. Might not be on the show tomorrow or this one.
Yeah.
So everyone, welcome. Hi. Welcome back to another Sip of Knowledge. My name is Martin Duffy. I'm a former senior master of whiskey for Diageo, just 14 years in the industry there. And then tack on another 18 glorious months as national brand ambassador for Benedictine. That was a waste of time. And then
my bottle of Benedictine. I should have grabbed it.
You should have, yeah.
Could have taunted you with it.
Yes, please. Actually, Benedictine's great liqueur. It's just a waste.
It is.
It was just a horrible job. And then 8 glorious years as co-producer of the Chicago Independent Spirit Expo, which returned this year here in Chicago, oddly enough. And then for the last 7 years, I have been the sole brand representative for Glencairn Crystal in all of North America and probably South America, though I haven't been down there yet. So there you go. Oh, lots of work to do. Lizard?
Thank you very much, Marty. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Liz Rhoades, technical distiller and spirit consultant. Have over a decade experience in alcoholic beverage, spanning across several different sites and product types and spirit types, including beer, rum, vodka. But my particular favorite and expertise, of course, is in whiskey, what the show's about, and that we're going to talk to these lovely folks, Nora and Adam, about in just a second. Spent most of my career at a tiny little mom and pop shop known as Diageo, but I'm now currently founder and principal at Spirit Safe Consulting. And I know you guys, you're like, what's the Spirit Safe Consulting
How can we find out more, Liz?
I would love to see more about that. Well, it's your lucky day. You can, if you just scroll down to the About the Host section, there's actually a link to my website, so check it out. Lou?
Awesome. Thank you, Liz. My name is Lou Bryson. I don't make whiskey or put it in a glass. I just write about it. And these are 2 of my books. Tasting Whiskey. Whiskey Masterclass. Very nice. Great Christmas presents. And it's not too late, even today. It is not too late to grab some of these for your loved ones.
Big.
Bravo. Thank you.
You gotta have some huge stockings to stuff with these.
That's correct. That's correct. I do write for the award-winning Daily Beast Half Full section, and I am happy to say I'm also back writing for Massachusetts Beverage Business, which was one of the first places to actually throw me a bone and hire me to write for them way back in the 90s. And I'm back there. Just had a piece there on whiskey terroir. occasioned by tasting the Waterford single malts.
Mhm.
However, I can't tell you what I'm drinking this week because we're going to be rolling through them. Nora and Adam sent us samples. So this week, I'm going to be drinking Lost Lantern. And so with that, we're going to roll right into the intro today. Nora Ganley-Roper and Adam Polonski are Lost Lantern. Lost Lantern, and I'm hoping to get an explanation of the name. I assume there's a Diogenes connection, but maybe not. They are an independent bottler, which you don't usually see in America, particularly one that's focused almost all on new distilleries. Independent bottlers are fairly common in Scotland, where they buy casks, they bottle them. Sometimes they blend them. Sometimes they do single casks. But we haven't really seen a lot of that in America. Usually, what you'll have is maybe a brand without a distillery, which is reasonably common, and they'll just buy whiskey consistently from the same sources. Not what they're doing. So I was intrigued by this. I've been intrigued for this for a while. I've known Adam for a number of years, and we're going to find out everything about it today, and why they did it, and how it's gone, and what it is. Because I find that independent bottling is still one of the things that people either don't know about at all or don't really understand. So we're going to dig into that today and get you a big old draft of knowledge, a full glass this time.
Like a pint.
Right? Yeah.
Like a almost huge, 750 lager.
So what we do at this time every week, guys, is ask you to essentially tell us how you got to where you are today, how you came to these this moment in your careers. So
Point A to point B.
That's actually more something like point D
L.
to point K.
Point L. You're right. Point A would be
really
first.
don't. Yeah, we don't want that.
Yeah,
we don't want to hear about your high
start a little
school
later.
shenanigans.
Start when you started
We've all
drinking
done that.
to now. Which
Still
is
gonna take a while.
They point looking at I'm saying point K.
I think K
On the lifeline.
Oh,
on
wait,
the lifeline
point
thing.
L for Lost Lantern.
Oh my God! I was like,
There
what
we
was
go.
that? Jesus
Okay,
Christ.
all right.
Oh,
So
all right.
with that, way too much blather. Why don't you guys actually say something intelligent?
No, we're not going to say anything. Just carry on from there.
Too late.
But thank
screwed
you
it
for
up.
the great
Can
introduction.
we start drinking?
Yes.
Yeah, let's
so
We did discuss that. Sorry, but I completely forgot.
yeah. So as we tell a little bit more about our story, why don't you have a dram of the American vatted Malta? And we'll explain more about that at the tail end of kind of our origin story.
Yes.
This
with
is
Marty.
750, by the way.
Yeah.
My hand is just enormous. Says a hand.
Please pour that into the giant Glen can that I know you have back there somewhere.
Well, I'm bored. This is the giant Glencairn. Well, the enormous hand. Huge.
Before I tell you about my background, Marty, I have to say I always thought you actually were Scottish because you do the fake Scottish accent so much. So I'm excited. I'm shocked and
So we've
confused.
learned something today as well. So
I'm
There
from
you
the
go.
Highlands of the southwest side of Chicago.
Yes,
Yeah.
there you go. But anyway, one of the unique things about Lost Lantern, I think, is that we both came into this from the industry in different ways. And I actually, before starting this, I worked at Whiskey Advocate. I was a senior whiskey specialist there. After Lou left, while Lou was there, I was at one of our company's other magazines, a trade magazine for wine and spirits retailers, really writing about like the latest trends in whiskey and other spirits. And before that, I was writing about video games for Newsweek, which was a pretty fun job. So I figured video games aren't enough. I have to add cocktails and whiskey into the mix too. So good combo.
So I have to ask, what is it like a movie review or like what's the commentary? What exactly did you write about?
Most of it, there were some reviews. There was some like guides to like figuring out how to do particular things in particular games. There's a little bit of clickbait chasing fancy headlines and
listicles kind of thing. Yeah.
that kind of thing. Not as sophisticated as writing about whiskey, of course, but quite fun. There was like a year or so where I was getting all my video games and most of my whiskey from that I was not paying for, so that was nice. But yeah, was reviewing American whiskey at Whiskey Advocate, especially from new distilleries, and ultimately was writing about independent bottlers from Scotland as well, and realized like why has this never been done for American whiskey before in the way that they do it in Scotland, and ultimately brought the idea to Nora, who is my business partner and also my wife, and we took it from there. And
my background, so I worked at Astor Wines and Spirits in New York as a sales manager there. So that was my crash course in whiskey. I actually came in as a wine person, but then got promoted to sales manager and needed to know the spirits. So I got pretty quickly up to speed. And also, I mean, can't complain about the selection. I really got to taste the whole breadth of what was available. Although for us, it was still, even in New York, in his job and my job, we still couldn't get our hands on a lot of what was available across the US, which was one of the impetuses for this, where he was writing a story about independent bottling and craft whiskey at the same time. And for a long time, we discussed how annoying it was that there wasn't an independent bottler here. We really wanted someone to go find all the good things and bring it to us in our jobs, and we would get to taste the cool things happening across the US. And over the course of probably 2 years of discussion, it moved from, it's super annoying no one's doing this, to someone's definitely going to do this soon, to perhaps we're the two to do it, to let's run the numbers and see, to, okay, we're putting our stuff in storage and we are doing this. Wow. So it's definitely... it came from a place where we really wanted this to exist, separate from us being the people to do it, to a place where we realized that with our backgrounds, with our spirits background, I also have worked in startups, building early stage companies from the ground up. So between his knowledge and also his connections to distilleries and my business side, we were really two of the people that could do this in a good way. So, yeah.
And the vision really is there are so many distilleries all over the country now. There are more than 2,000, and about 90% of those distilleries have opened in the last 10 years. And I think 98% in the last like 15 to 20 years. And so besides for the places that we're all familiar with in Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana, there's so many distilleries out there. Most of them are pretty regional or locally available, and their whiskey has changed a lot over a relatively short time. So if you're not tasting it pretty regularly, you don't necessarily know who's making really interesting whiskey in interesting and unique ways that reflect their terroir, their regionality, and who isn't. And we saw that places that had just been getting started a few years before we got going were now making really excellent whiskey that people didn't know about, and we really wanted to find a way to share that with people. And that's really the vision for Lost Lantern.
And it is inspired very much by Scotch independent bottlers. We're doing both single casks and blends. Our first blend is what you all are tasting right now.
Oh, okay.
And the reason we did, so this is an American vat malt is what we're calling it, because we wanted to signal and tip our hats to the Scotch tradition of vat malt, which you all, I'm sure, know that is not a term that's used anymore.
Yeah,
but,
so you're kind of thumbing your nose at them too. I like that.
like a little bit of A, a little bit of B. But it also signals to Scotch drinkers that this is something that might be of interest to them. It's all single malts. So it's single malts from 6 distilleries all across the US. And we actually made this collaboratively with the distilleries that we worked with. So over the course of one day, which is crazy, we sat in a room, we tasted through samples, we put together blends, discussed them, and came up with this blend.
And when you say, just to be clear, when you say we, you're talking about the two of you and reps from the distilleries?
And the distillers or owners. Do you want to go through it? Who's better at the list than I am?
So it's 6 distilleries from most corners of the country. It's Copperworks, which is in Seattle, Washington, Westward in Portland, Oregon, Santa Fe Spirits in Santa Fe, New Mexico, Balcones from Texas, Virginia Distillery Company in Virginia, and 888 from the island of Nantucket in Massachusetts. So really wide-ranging climates and styles of whiskey and how long they've been making things. And we thought that it would really be, I mean, just as Scotland has had its historic regions for forever, American single malt is very new, but these are from areas that are like totally different from each other, and in a country that's much larger than Scotland. So it was fun to bring very different and unique flavors together in this way.
And a good way to kick off our blends. as well.
Guys, how did you do this? Did you rent an RV and travel the country, or did you know, where you like Charles Kuralt in the old days, just kind of going on the road? Did you film any of it? That would be kind of cool if you did a movie.
We didn't. We probably will in the future because we want to do this again. We have photos from. So we actually everyone gathered together. It was ADI in 2018. 2019, yeah, 2019. Because everyone was already planning to be together because it was a conference, and we all got into a room and spent a day together at the end of it. And then Virginia Distillery Company actually did the blend for us, the bottling. But they executed after we had the plan for it. They executed on the blend itself and bottled it for us. So we had everything sent there. Definitely, probably the hardest thing that I've had to do so far for the company was figuring out how to get whiskey in bond off of Nantucket. But
there's no bridges.
There's not a way to do that. I feel like it's all uphill or downhill depending on how you look at it.
Old school, you roll it into the water and just push it. Sure.
But
Put it on a whaler.
You said that was 2018, and you know, so just speaking of the vatted malt, I'm hearing more and more of that happening, and Good Deeds Spirits just did a vatted malt.
Yeah.
And I know, speaking of Nantucket, those guys participated in the blend as well. So you guys may have been responsible for creating that framework out of Nantucket.
I think in part it came out of our road trip, because we did not buy an RV, but we did buy a Prius and drive around the country for 8 months and got weird looks when we were in South Dakota and Wyoming and places like that. The Vermont license plate in our Prius, visiting distilleries. But as we went to places, especially American single malt distilleries, and told them about what we were doing, they kept being like, "Oh, you're going to be doing American blending? That's super cool. I've always wanted to blend with other people's single malt." And after the third time we heard this, we were like, "Wait, they all want to blend a single malt. We want to blend a single malt.
Probably somebody wants to drink
this."
Yeah, and it was actually very fortuitous, because what we found out is when you invite a bunch of distillers that don't get a chance to show off their whiskey to each other, when you invite them to the same blending session, they bring great barrel samples. So the type of samples that they were bringing for this blend are probably not tasks that we would have been able to get our hands on otherwise. And I think that has really created a lot of the complexity and nuance of this, is the range of casks that we ended up having go into this blend.
And I'm curious what you all think, but we wanted our first blend to be a blend of single malts, but not one that tasted like Scotch blended malts. It has a lot more new oak in it. It does have some peated whiskey in it. It also has some mesquite smoked whiskey, which is certainly not something you see in Scotland. So it has nods to the Scottish tradition, while being what we think as something that captures the flavor of American single malt where it is right now.
Yeah, I got a nice little I see on your tasting notes you said chocolate covered oranges. I didn't get the orange peel so much, but I did get a cocoa. So like powdered cocoa, and like a roasted nut. I mean, I don't know, it seems a little, of course I've been eating a lot of chocolate covered nuts.
For me, I would agree with the cocoa notes, but I was trying to pin down the fruit complexity, and it was more dried fruit. But as soon as you mentioned some of the distillers you collaborated with, specifically Westward, because I think tropical fruit more with their malt, and I was like, oh, now that you say that, now I'm getting Westward. Now I'm getting, so it's some of the parts, right, is a totally different product. So for sure.
I mean, it also shows me one of the things that I do really like about American single malt. It always seems so much brighter than Scotch. I don't know if it's I want to think I want to call it acidity, but I don't think that's really it. But it's definitely got brighter is all I can come up with, which is sad, considering this is supposed to be what I do. I don't know, it's more like licking a 9-volt, it's got some zip to it.
More
That's a
tannic.
beautiful. If you smell the glass afterwards, I didn't pick up the smoke as much on the whiskey, but if you smell the glass afterwards,
I agree.
Yeah.
especially
And
the
that-
influence of Santa Fe.
Those volatile phenols, right?
They're the worst.
Those volatile phenols.
Those
Volatile
a little
phenols.
less volatile than everything else.
I never invite them to parties because they're always so volatile.
Yes.
What's our next whiskey? I just want to keep things moving on the whiskey front because that's.
You want to do that instead of.
Yeah, I'm gonna change up the order on you because that's what I like to do. We're gonna do. Let's do the Cedar Ridge single cask next.
Cedar Ridge it is.
Yeah.
So I
So,
noticed real
so
quick
the-
before we, sorry, if I may ask about typically how much do you release out? Because this one I noticed it says 3,000 bottles, and some of the other variants are much less.
So that's the only blend. So that was 12 casks, which ended up being roughly 3,000 bottles. The rest of these are single casks and they're cask strength. So they are somewhere between 150 and 200 bottles total, generally.
Yeah. Nora, with going before we leave that, how much was it equal parts, or was there one a little more than the others?
So
what was the base of the blend?
It was 12 full casks. There's slight variations depending on volume. So the Balcones casks are inherently going to have less volume in them because they're in hot climates versus a westward. So it was slightly different, but it's funny because we tasted a ton of different combinations, and the one that won out was the 2 casks per distillery, period. It was really interesting. So it is roughly equal quantity from each distillery. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Cedar Ridge, beautiful little Iowa.
Yeah.
Lou and I almost went out there. We almost went, did a little road trip to Cedar Ridge.
It's not that far from you. So it's like
not for me. For Lou, it is, but not for me.
Yeah. So we really see our mission as twofold. It's to create blends that bring flavors together in a new way, and to release single casks or single distillery releases that shine a light in distilleries that are not as widely available or as widely known. And we think of Cedar Ridge in that vein. They're in the middle of Iowa, and they're actually very, very well known in Iowa. They make Iowa's top-selling bourbon. It outsells Jim Beam in Iowa.
Wow.
Which is the first new distillery or craft distillery to become the leader in its state. But beyond that, a lot of it doesn't get out there. And when it does, it's not at cask strength. And it's certainly not sherry finished single malt, which is what this is. So this is an American single malt that was finished for 2 years in a sherry cask. We think it's our version of a Scotch sherry bomb in some ways.
Well, it's spent equal time, right? It was 2 years in New Oak, and then 2 years in sherry.
Yeah.
That is one of the most Scotch tasting American single malts I've ever put lip to.
Yep.
And it's from Iowa.
Wow.
And we like it because when you think of Iowa, if you say, okay, what is an Iowa single malt going to taste like? You are not going to describe
it's not that.
Yeah. And even their quintessential, which is their normal single malt, it has some component of it. Theirs is more Solera style, so it has some amount that's in sherry, but it's not like this.
Wow,
and we didn't realize it when we bought this cask at the time, but this is actually the head distiller Murphy Quint's favorite cask from the distillery. And so he sold it to us. He let us take it, but he was not so happy about it. But it's a fun story to tell now. And when this was released to their newsletter, he actually wrote a whole note about the experience of having us swipe his favorite cask. So we take it as a compliment that we had a good enough
sharing is caring.
Yeah, exactly.
Sharing is caring.
Oh, sharing. I thought sherry was caring.
Sharing is caring.
Sherry.
Well, sharing, like sharing a sheep.
Sharing.
When you share a sheep, is that like caring?
No, I meant sharing, like
Sharing.
sharing a cask, but a sherry cask
Yeah.
Or sherry
Sherry.
is sharing
is caring.
or caring.
This
In
is
dairy.
a whole new
Dairy
level.
is caring.
Sorry, we
Dairy.
just watched Dairy Girls the other night. It was,
Oh, love it.
Oh,
Oh my God.
nice. The adult film?
what? No, the series.
Oh,
No, no,
I don't know that.
Moving right
No,
along.
I think it's the third time that we've binged it. It's just it never stops being funny.
Let's see. I'm looking at the notes.
Wow, that's I mean, Cedar Ridge impressed me very early on. Working at Whiskey Advocate, you know, you get, Adam, you get freaking samples from everybody. And Cedar Ridge sent some stuff in fairly early on, and it was one of those, this is really promising things, you know. And I don't mean to damn with faint praise. It really was. I mean, I kind of marked them down as someplace to watch, but I only ever watched their bourbon, and this is woof.
Well, they had a wonderful layout at ADI did a room at Tales of the Cocktail a few years back, and Cedar Ridge had a table there, and you didn't really want to leave that table. And and I'm always a little, you see too many SKUs at a table, you think, oh my God, they're throwing everything but the kitchen sink out there. But now you go, wow, they put a lot into each one. They're all good.
Yeah. And for us, we really want to defy people's expectations of what American whiskey is and what it can be. And we think
mission accomplished. This is blowing me away. I can't believe this.
Do you ever work on the front end with for a collaboration, or is it more about
just showcasing what they've already done?
Yeah.
So far, we've only bought totally mature final casks, but we're already talking to the distilleries about collaboration and brainstorming and all of that, because we think that it is a fun opportunity for us to add a unique spin. And we, as you can see with the vat and malt, we love collaboration and finding ways to work together. And we think that the best whiskey comes out of multiple people putting their heads together. So we do have plans to do that in the future, for sure.
A lot of folks who are really into American whiskey, sometimes they don't even bother looking into what the Scots have done, or now even the Irish, and they should just kind of even explore what Scotland did with back in the 1800s. I believe is Gordon MacPhail. I believe they're well over 140 years old, something like that, maybe even older. And then Cadenhead, Blackadder, in more recent years, Whiskey Galore. I don't know if there's still Whiskey Galore still exists. But then we had Louise McGuane on from Ireland with Chapelgate. And so she's doing the exact same thing there. But what's cool is you guys are in a way, especially if you lay these down for a while, you're preserving a little bit of history. I mean, Gordon MacPhail, they put out bottles that are 60, 70 years old.
Yeah, I just guys, about their 80-year-old.
Luckily, you're both youngish, so maybe be around for that when you lay down a 80-year-old Cedar Ridge. Oh, both of you coming out. Life support.
Yeah.
I don't know about 80-year-old whiskey during this generation, but we do like how independent bottlers in Scotland have been able to do that, both from very old whiskey from existing distilleries and old whiskey from distilleries that closed a long time.
That's right.
Here yet, but if we are able to stay around for a long time and build this the way that we want to, we can be the outlet for distilleries that are either struggling or finds a good home.
Well, but that's just the thing. I mean, you guys could shine a light on distilleries that need the extra boost, but also a lot of these distilleries, I mean, we've already, even though there's 2,000 now, I don't know how many distilleries haven't made it, but there's a lot of distilleries that make really good juice. They just don't know how to market. And so they go bye-bye. But it would be a shame that their stuff wasn't saved somehow, and that's where you guys come in. Huh? That'd be nice.
And one of the nice things about what we do is even places that do market well, like Cedar Ridge, they have a great market in their home state, and that's about where their production can carry the states around that, and don't necessarily want to get to the size of like a Heaven Hill or something like that.
I have to admit, nothing about the name Cedar Ridge makes me think of Iowa.
Oh, you never heard of the Great Battle of Cedar Ridge?
No. I
It
don't
was two
think that
guys.
You have either.
No, it was two guys throwing axes at each other. It wasn't that big of a battle, but it was
And Slipknot,
cool
right?
for the locals.
Am I not
Yep.
mistaken?
Yep,
Huh?
they're doing a Slipknot whiskey as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
But one of the nice things about what we can do is that we can get our whiskey out to about 40 states. Where because we launched during the pandemic, we're working with retail partners that can ship around the country. So if you go on our website, loslanternwhiskey.com, and just put in your state, it'll tell you where to get it. So even if you're not in Iowa, it's pretty easy to get it elsewhere in states they normally can't get to, which is one of the nice things about the model.
That's great,
Yeah.
Now, do you have a whiskey, one whiskey representing all 50 states, or have you've gone to some states and go, yeah, not quite yet there at that state?
You
can tell it's just us.
Yeah, no one ever watches.
I think some states are further along with whiskey development than others so far. And I mean, every single distillery that we buy whiskey from, we've also visited in person because we think that's a really important part of what we're doing. Because in order to do what we like to do, which is tell the story of the distillery, we have to go there and feel the climate and meet the people. And also, there's just enough bad actors in the industry where we go in and they're giving us their song and dance and we look at it and we say, but your still isn't hooked up, or the piece doesn't make
Or it's
sense.
made of cardboard. It's a big cardboard cutout.
So for us, it's really important that we go and do the due diligence so that when people buy our whiskey, they know that A, it's going to be of a certain quality level, and B, we have seen what they're up to and understand the ins and outs of the whiskey making process for each of the distilleries we work with. So it is a partnership, and it's a longer term relationship, because this is actually the second Cedar Ridge whiskey that we've had. The first bourbon we put out was our bourbon with them. And we had actually gone to buy bourbon there and tasted this cask. We didn't think of them as single malt producers at the time, but we tasted this and we were like, all right, we stand corrected. So here we have this as well.
Now, have you had anyone balk at you as far as, nah, that's all right, you don't need to be part of this?
Handful.
There's
a handful, really
fewer than we thought. We thought that this is something that's pretty new to the US. We thought a lot of people were going to be like, either I don't get it, or I don't want to do this. Like, why would we trust you with our brand name? That kind of thing. Especially with American single malt producers, it's been very, very easy because most of them are quite familiar with Scotch independent bottlers, and they see it as a sign that American whiskey is reaching, or American craft whiskey is reaching, a certain level of maturity, that there's room for an independent bottler. When there was only 2 or 3 American single malt distilleries around the country, there was no reason for this to exist.
Right.
Now that there are a ton and the whiskeys at a certain level, we can provide real value that maybe wouldn't have been able to 5 or 10 years ago.
Some distilleries took a little bit longer to come around. They said, let's see how your first couple of releases go. Also, the New York Times article definitely helped us convince them that it was worth working with us. But the first couple of releases have gone so well that we've had a lot of those distilleries that were in the wait and see kind of mantra have now sold us whiskey. So
and they see that we're helping to tell their story. Like, we're not hiding where it's from. It's like Los Angeles and Cedar Ridge right there. It's not like hidden on our website somewhere.
Right.
Talking about where it came from really is the whole point of what we're doing, and to challenge people's expectations in that way. So distilleries see it as a way to get the word out there to a slightly different group of customers than they normally talk to.
Yeah,
so
it feels like a win-win. Yeah.
Which again is what happened in Scotland with a lot of brands. They was it Lefroy had somebody had Lefroy and they had to change it to Leapfrog.
Yeah,
on the bottling, and Glenfarclas for a long time didn't want. You could buy barrels, but you can't say Glenfarclas on them.
Yeah.
Well, do the teaspooning thing.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Teaspoon of not somebody else's whiskey.
Yeah, we've not had to do that yet. We've talked about it before, and it's something that we may do at some point, either if we want to, or do like a miniature blend, or just if someone doesn't want to have their name out there in the same way. But so far, everyone we worked with has let us put their name on their bottle. Even our blend has all 6 distillery names right on it. And this next one we think was a pretty good get in terms of having the name on there, which is the Smooth Ambler. They're
owned by Pernod.
They're owned by Pernod Ricard. So there were some
Another little mom and pop company.
Yeah, right.
French. Mom and pop French.
Actually, that's what Jimmy Russell used to say. Well, it's a family business. The family's in Paris.
We had somebody a marketing company try to put Everlower into the Indie Spirit Expo, and Dave Schmier had to call him up and said, "Yeah, we're an independent spirit. There's like family owned distilleries." And she goes, "Oh no, it's family owned. It's owned by a couple of brothers, some Chivas brothers." You work for this company, right?
Oh, that's fabulous. That's so good.
Wow. I'm sorry. I'm going to get thrown out of this restaurant.
Yeah.
Now, do you sell these as 750s individually, or would you do box sets of like, here's 3 from one state, or 3 of a certain character, or something along the lines of one of these?
So far, we've done just 750s, and generally they're individual. One of our retail partners, we do bundles with them, but it's not in any pretty boxes. So far it's been, here's the whiskey, have fun tasting it and drinking it. We do hope in the future that we can do small tasting sets with the 50s. It's just the logistical challenge of filling 50 milliliter bottles has not been within our wheelhouse as a new company so far. But I think it will be fun for people to be able to buy little tasting.
We're only a year into this. We're testing what people want, what they're interested in. We definitely hear a lot of demand for smaller bottles, and I think that would be fun down the road.
Yeah.
So at Smooth Ambler, did John Little have something to do with the selection of this? Or did you just say, John, butt out?
He definitely helped us. And honestly, it was the very tail end of our road trip. I think Smooth Ambler was our second to last distillery visit. And we were heading to Virginia Distillery Company, which is our bottler, early on. And we were like, wait, we're going to pass right by Smooth Ambler. There's no way we'll be able to work with them, but we should at least stop by and say hi to John Little. And he was so into it, and is really, really likes this idea, and in some ways is similar to what his vision was for Smooth Ambler early on. And they were sourcing from more traditional distilleries and still do, but they've always been very transparent that they're sourcing their whiskey. And at the same time, they've been making their own whiskey. So this is sourced from Smooth Ambler's West Virginia distilled whiskey. It's Lost Lantern's first wheated bourbon. It's 5 years old.
It is 5 years old. Yeah.
5 years old, 53-gallon barrel. And we think it's really fun to be sourcing something from one of the best and earliest blenders and sourcers themselves, but this is their own whiskey.
And this is bottled at 124?
Yeah.
Yep.
This is 100.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lou, at this point in your life, you can't tell proof anymore.
I can't even taste anything anymore.
No.
There's just a vague, warm sensation. That's all I read.
The Cedar Ridge.
That's why I read everyone else's tasting notes.
The Cedar Ridge was 115, so this is a step up.
I couldn't tell that. That was pretty drinkable at 115.
Oh my God, yes.
This may be a good dovetail because there was a question. You guys are doing pretty much everything at cask strength, correct?
Except for our blend, which we proofed down to 105.
Okay. Yeah, so there was a question out, I think from Tom. So Tom for joining, about slow proofing. So I'll kick it to you guys and your ideas on that, and then I'll chime in as well, because I think it's there's a lot of opinions, I think, out there. So I don't know if you want to take that first, and then I'll kind of chime in.
Yeah. And I know it probably comes because there was a Vine Pair article that we were in recently about.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure. So
in particular, so I know that is probably where it came from. So we slow proofed it over 3 months from roughly 120 down to 105. And the reason we did it is partially because one of the great things about what we do is we take advice from the distilleries we work with about different ways to do it. And because Virginia Distillery Company was doing the combining and the blending, we talked to them about how we wanted to do it. And after talking to them and a few other distilleries, we decided to do slow proofing, partially because, especially sourcing from 6 different distilleries and doing 12 casks that were wildly different, when it wasn't proofed down at all, it was super jagged. Even when we waited for a number of days, even a couple of weeks, the whiskey didn't integrate very well. But if we added water and added it slowly, we found that the flavors integrated better, and it softened the mouthfeel. And something about slowly adding the water, and I'm sure, Liz, you know more about the chemical interactions and can speak to that, but we found that just like, I mean, it's what I always like to say, and he hates when I say this, so take this with a pinch of salt, is
I love
like
it.
a soup or a curry or a stew, where the first day it's tasty, but the second day the flavors are so much better because they've actually had time to marry, interact.
Right.
And we found that because there were so many different flavors, that didn't happen without water. And over time, with the slow proofing, that actually allowed the different flavors to interact and really become a cohesive whole that wasn't defined by what the flavors were previously. And that time frame made sense and got us to where we wanted to go and how long we needed based off of the really slow parameters to get it from 120 to 105. It ended up taking 3 months. That's our spiel. Yeah. Liz, go ahead.
No, it's okay. And again, it's one of those, right? I feel like there are a lot of schools of thought and a lot of camps on whether or not the slow proofing down or not. And I know there's actually a research project happening currently through the Distilling Research Grant, digging into what actually happens between proofing down slowly and not, with saponification. And certainly there's changes, chemical changes that happens, and I think there are some other things to consider along with it, right? Filtration, what's happening with filtration. Certainly if you're not diluting down to 43% or below, a lot of high molecular weight fatty acids and waxes are still going to be in solution, versus if you're diluting down, they're immiscible. So are you chill filtering? Are you not? What type of water you're using? So I think there's a lot of things in the mix. So I'm actually excited to kind of see what comes out of the research. And at the end of the day, if that's sensory is a really powerful tool, I think. And I think we have to remember that our industry is art and science. At least I like to think whiskey is where art meets science. So yeah. So great. It's a great question. And again, I think there are a lot of variables at play, certainly. So I'm excited to kind of see what comes out of this research as well. So Tom, TBD on the technical paper there.
Hey guys, I had another question as far as working with the distilleries. Do you ever find that you're gravitating to one barrel but they're trying to go, you know what? I think this one represents us better, and it could be cheaper for you. But yeah, this one, because maybe I want to sell that and save that for something special later. You get that? And name names.
Like we said with Cedar Ridge, I think we have somehow accidentally acquired an knack for getting people to sell us things they didn't necessarily intend to sell. Because they're always like, oh yeah, let's go taste our favorite barrel. It's really good. And guess what? Their favorite barrel is probably going to be among our favorite barrels too. And then we'll be like, that's real good. Can we get that?
But it's worth noting that we never select on site. I know a lot of the barrel
Oh.
picks in Kentucky, especially, are done on site, but we actually either bring back or have them ship us samples so that we can go through full sensory analysis in the same place over multiple days in different settings after we've eaten different things, different times of day, all of those to make sure that there's some consistency in the casks that we're selecting. We also both have to say yes to every single cask we buy, and we have relatively different palates, which is both a blessing and a curse because we don't always agree. But when we do agree, we feel like there's a higher likelihood that the cask will speak to a broader range of palates. So
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, this is really nice. I could see why they amble smoothly.
And we're excited because they put out a little of their own stuff. They came out with Big Level, which I believe was Bottled and Bond a couple years ago. I haven't seen much of it at Cask Strength outside of West Virginia. I know they do some in the tasting room. Oh, I see we have another guest with us.
Mhm.
No, you're going to see even
Shadow
more here
tuna.
shortly.
Yeah.
Very discerning palate.
Totally allergic. Shadow likes to flash people, so just there she goes.
There we go. Very nice.
Luckily, being blocked.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, get out of here. Oh my god.
So how often do you have to explain what it is you're doing to consumers? Do they get it pretty quickly, or
literally always?
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless it's someone who like already collects Scotch whiskey or buys a lot of Scotch. Most Americans don't really know that much about independent bottling, even if they are really into whiskey. And we're always pleasantly surprised when people do, but we think part of our job is explaining what we're doing, why we do this, how it's different than just like a retail barrel pick, something like that. So we actually look forward to the day when there are other independent bottlers in the US as well, because then there'll be more familiarity with what we're doing. So we can just say like, can really focus on the distillery stories and that side of thing. But
I think it's a new thing. It takes a little explanation to say it's us, but it's not we're never going to distill. We don't distill. And yes, you can see the distillery name on the label. And generally people like the transparency, but there isn't an obvious example of when people do that. So it's fun. It's fun, but we do look forward to the day when an independent bottler as a phrase automatically means something to people.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, for so many years, I mean, for nearly 100 years, you had distilleries in Scotland that nobody ever really heard about, and the whiskey went into blends,
Right.
which was still, to this day, is still the predominant use for single malts over in Scotland. And then, so people's exposure to those really only started coming around in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
I mean, 30 years with single malts on any major scale. But then, so then they start, and only a small fraction of Scotch drinkers really gravitated to all these independent bottlers, not quite understanding it, since many, independent bottlers don't mention the distillery either. So it's
really
like,
interesting. There was a whiskey bar in Philadelphia. It's no longer open anymore. I can't even remember the name of it. But it was down in Old City. They actually had a separate small bar where they kept the independent bottling.
So cool. Yeah.
And, you went in there and there was like 4 seats at the bar and 1 table. And I'm like, why did you put the Cadenhead and such over here? And the guy's like, because nobody knows what the hell it is, and I get tired of explaining it. What did you want? I'm like, I will have that. He's like, yeah, see, that's why we have the small bar, because nobody really knows what they want. Okay, then.
Yeah.
But it was kind of a cool thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that's that, the thing I never really gravitated to a lot of independent bottlings because I taste one, it'd be fantastic, great. But then I go, oh, where can I get one? Oh, yeah, they don't, that was it.
Yeah.
There's only so many bottles, they don't have any more. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Yeah, which is true for us too.
Yeah.
for now.
Although we also, I remember when she was at Astor, there were always a couple of Gordon MacPhails that were not single casks. It was like the Gordon MacPhail Highland Park 8-year-old bottling, and it was a blend of Highland Park.
Oh.
It was always 8 years old. It was always on the shelf, but was still different than the official bottlings of Highland Park. So we like that kind of thing. We expect we'll probably do something like that in the relatively near future, where it's not just a single cask, has a somewhat more consistent flavor profile, but it's still from a place that otherwise is hard to get your hands on, or a different take from someplace that's more widely available.
Yeah.
Now, before we move on to our last whiskey, that for this session, because some of us will move on to other whiskeys after this is all over. Two things. One, Lost Lantern. Where the heck did that name come from?
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'd forgotten to ask.
You're welcome, Lou.
Thanks, Dad.
Yeah.
Do you want to take that since you're the writer?
Yeah, I like to think of it as we shine a light on distilleries and whiskeys and people that have not been discovered yet. It's whiskeys that are out there that are amazing, but you really need to be looking for, and we do that work for people. Also, it's alliterative, memorable, and sounds kind of cool, so that helps too.
Yes. Yes,
we thought about calling it Ganley-Roper and Polonski in the lines of Gordon and MacPhail, but seemed a little less memorable.
It doesn't really trip off the tongue quite the way Lost Lantern
I like
does.
it.
You're right.
Yeah. Sounds Roper and Polonski. It sounds like, I don't know,
A law
like,
firm.
Law firm.
Yeah.
Or we'd be making vodka. I feel like you don't think whiskey, but there's a reason why we don't have last names on our name bar here, because then you wouldn't see all of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how about this? You're located in Vermont. Do you have a shop that people can go to?
So
an
not
actual physical location.
Not in person, because we don't. Right now, we contract with a distillery in southern Vermont to do all of our bottling, called Village Garage, out of Bennington.
Sorry.
We will hopefully next year have a small space, but potentially won't even have a shop there. Now it's just on our website, as Adam said, lostlanternwhiskey.com. Just anyone can go in there, put their state, including Vermont, and it'll get shipped to their door. So,
all right.
I do love the Gordon MacPhail shop in Elgin, and
I was going to say you need to be like the Lost Lantern Whiskey Shop and deli.
I know.
Deli.
If only that were legal in the U.S.
Yeah.
So sad that kind of thing. I mean, I don't care about the deli side, but it would be awesome to have a store.
That actually brings up a question about illegal. I mean, is your whiskey available in states like New Hampshire and Pennsylvania?
The retail partners that we work with, we don't have full control over where they ship to, which is nice. But they can ship. One of them can ship to New Hampshire.
Okay.
I'm not sure about Pennsylvania, but they
probably not, because we don't get any nice things.
So
yeah, but the nice thing about our setup is we send it. The retailers buy from us.
That's pretty great.
Where they want, and so, but we have it all set up so that it's easy for people who want to buy. They can just come in.
So are you guys with Benny's here in Chicago?
There is a link.
Ooh.
The green rectangle at the bottom of the screen is where you can go do that and purchase.
Get you some whiskey.
Yeah.
Isn't there the Sonny and Share button that Will was talking about?
We are not at Benny's yet. We talked to Brett when we were, I think, when we were on a
Before
road
we
trip in
launched,
the Midwest before we launched. So if you see Brett Pontoni around, put in a good word and tell him how wonderful
he won't listen to me.
I think it's time for our last whiskey.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Nora. It's nice to have someone else like keeping track of
herding the cats, literal and figurative. Yes.
We're being good today. We usually talk for a ridiculously long time.
I do like the guide of us watching the clock and trying to stay within. I like confines. So this last one is along with the Smooth Ambler as part of our winter collection of single cask. This comes from McCarthy's out of Oregon, and McCarthy's is one of the distilleries that before we started this convinced us that this Lost Lantern project could happen, that there was enough whiskey that was interesting being made in the US of the caliber that we needed. So it took us a while to convince them to sell us whiskey, but we're excited because this is a 6-year. Until 2 months ago, 6-year McCarthy's had never existed. All of the single malt that they put out was 3 years. So they also recently put out a small amount of 6-year, but Oregon only. And this is a single cask at cask strength of their 6-year peated Oregon single malt. And it's worth noting that their whiskey peated, but it also has always been in Gariana oak.
Okay.
Just like Westland has their Gariana release.
I was gonna.
Yeah, has quietly been doing it.
Tons of vanillin. I'm getting woody vanillin notes, and that was actually the first thing I got versus peat. And I was like, oh, this is surprising.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, I had visited Stephen McCarthy years ago before he sold Clear Creek, and he told me that, all his spirits were based on spirits that he tasted in his travels. So that's why he did so many eau de vives. He traveled through Eastern Europe and such. This was based on Lagavulin. He tried Lagavulin, loved it. So he thought, I'm going to make a highly peated single malt. That's why he aged a minimum of 3 years. So it'd be like a Scottish single malt. And it was funny. I asked him once why he didn't make an older expression of it. Why just 3 years? And he said, oh, well, there's such a big demand for it. So I sell it right away and go, don't put one little cask aside, for an age it like at 10 or whatever. And you go, oh, that's funny. I never thought of that. Boom. Now there's a 6-year-old. I know he had nothing to do with it. And my suggestion fell on deaf ears, but no. Somehow I think it got through the ether and
into someone's ear. Yeah.
That's what we think is really fun about this is McCarthy's and Clear Creek have been around for a little while. They've been making whiskey making single malt since the 90s. They're one of the first two American single malt distilleries I know about, along with St. George, that are still around. But this is they're for the first 6-year-old. So I think that's fun to see that evolution. And it's a nod to one of the first American single malts that we discovered, and probably one of the first American single malts that you discovered too.
Yeah. Well, I was working for Diageo and representing Lagavulin when I first tasted this. And I thought, oh my God, I love this. I love I'm not a big, huge peat head, but this was unique and different, and it did remind me a lot of a Isla single malt.
Yeah.
Not necessarily Lagavulin, because the peat on here is a little more towards a little Ardbeggy.
I can see that.
Yeah. It's fun because these are actually two of the most traditional single malts we put out. We have the other single malts that we've put out were mesquite smoked. So it's interesting.
Ooh, yeah.
These two are more Scotch in style, but we have played with the truly American side of single malt as well in our releases. We're just
The mesquite is that cool? I'm sorry.
Oh, it was Colkegan or Santa Fe Spirits and Whiskey Del Bach. We're just out of stock of all of them. They're sold out. So we didn't want to give you tastes and then have everyone in the chat or watching know that they can't try it themselves.
So Colkegan is an interesting one. And Cullen, who was, almost everybody on your vatted malt was at
At our table.
ACSA.
At our table.
Right. But he even admitted when he first started making that whiskey, it wasn't up to snuff. And you taste it, you go, it's a little wrong. Then he made some adjustments, and now it is one of my favorite.
It's so
American
good.
single malts. Oh my God, it's so delicious. There's a sweetness underneath that mesquite.
Yeah.
Well, I remember when I was at Whiskey Advocate, I was like diving through the reviews database, and I would find reviews of craft whiskeys that Lou had written in like 2012 or so that said like, this stinks, but in 4 years it'll probably be really good. Let's be sure to check back. And no one had checked back. And then I was like, well, I should call that in.
So
and see what
you
it
checked
is.
back. Yeah.
Yeah, you should check back.
Often you were right. It was like, oh, this is really good now. They like were onto an idea at that when you tasted it was probably like 6 months in small barrels.
Right.
Now is the point where it was like 3 or 4 years in full size barrels, and that's a totally different proposition. So craft has evolved very, very quickly. And we think a lot of people have learned from what they were doing early on. Of course, their first batch of mesquite smoked whiskey is not going to be the most amazing thing they've ever done. No one had ever done it before.
Right.
They've done it a bunch of times.
Yeah.
No, they're all learning on the run.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I remember as recently as 5 years ago conversing with some other tasters, writers, etc., and just like, when the shit is anybody going to make a good whiskey? And I would say within 2 years, that conversation had completely changed.
Yeah. Well, and it was interesting too. I taste whiskeys that, I go to one bar and I'd say, I'll have one of these bourbons here, support the little guy. And I try it, and it was great, actually. I wasn't expecting it to be great, but I was going to support him anyway. And I go, oh my God, that's pretty good. I'd have 4 of them. Then I go to another bar a couple days later and try the same whiskey, and it wasn't so great. And you realize that
Old bottle.
even though they were working on, they were improving, they also had to work on consistency, which is what some of, I think, small guys still struggle with for the most part. But, that's part of the growing pains, man.
Well, that's when I packed up all my whiskey to move here over the last 6 months, pretty much anything I had that was small American distillery that I'd had for more than 5 years, I just got rid of it. Because it wasn't, what do you mean? No, I gave it to friends and let them do it.
Okay.
No, I mean, I've got, this is something I learned early on. I had a good friend who would come over and he would just polish off half a bottle of whiskey. And, the first couple of times, he was a really good friend. And the first couple of times I would get good stuff out and he'd just drink it. And then I realized, it doesn't really matter what I give him. He's just going to drink half a bottle of whiskey. So I started, giving him not the best whiskey, but something decent. And
Fair.
There you go. And everybody was happy. Because to be honest, it wasn't so much that he was drinking up the good whiskey. It was that he didn't give a damn. It was just like, he was there to have fun and have some drinks.
Right.
He wasn't there to taste great whiskey. I do have friends that come over for that, and we have a great time with that too. We're not weird about it, but I think there's a place for that.
That's the point of whiskey. I mean, I've always said this. I hate when people make a big deal, where they have to always analyze it. When you're just sitting around, it's like, stop
Have a
it.
drink.
Fucking, we're sitting around, we're talking. It's supposed to be a session, as the Scots would say. This whiskey's sessionable. You put a bottle down, you all blather a bunch, talking about shit, and then the bottle's gone. You get another bottle, but the one thing you didn't talk about was the whiskey. The whiskey kind of got the
I mean, every now and then you get a bottle or a dram that stops the conversation, and I would say that Cedar Ridge one might do that. But I mean, what you really want to do is have it stimulate the conversation, not become the conversation.
right. Yes, exactly.
Except that whistle pig in the teak. Holy crap! Right? Wow. That, I mean, we've been drinking at that bottle for months, and it still stops conversation every time I pour some. And
did Liz give you a bottle of that?
No, someone else did.
I think she did. Liz.
Oh, probably.
Liz. I didn't. Yeah, empty. My hands completely empty.
No, that's a bottle of vodka you have there or something.
Look at
Besides the size of your hands, you've probably got one hidden in the crack somewhere.
Huge. Caesar. Caesar hand.
Yeah, sorry. Drag us back, Liz, please.
I'm going to just bring it back a little bit. So what's in the hopper? Anything you could share? Any new winter blends, spring blends, collaborations?
Well, the winter release, which is the McCarthy's, the Smooth Ambler, and also a single cask rye from Starlight Distillery in Southern Indiana, just came out on December
Thank
1st.
you.
So those are very fresh. Right now, they're only available through one retailer, which you can find on our website. Can you say?
It's just
Seal
Sealbox.
It's through Sealbox.
We also work with an e-commerce partner that does it through our own website. We've just had shipping delays, as everyone does, where the shipment that was supposed to go to them is made it to California, but it's not at the retailer yet. So we'll probably on our site, it'll be released in early January. So, and then after that, the next release is not till March. It's a little quiet while everyone does their dry Januaries and all of those things.
Dry January.
I've got a non-alc whiskey coming out in January that I've been working on. So
perfect timing.
Wow.
Well, I just stopped off at Starlight last week on my way up from Louisville, and it was really night and day. I was there maybe 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when they did the judging.
Is it yeah.
Yeah, this was, I mean, it's amazing how much they've grown. Wilderness Trail, I was down, did the tour.
Crazy big. Yeah.
And that's just nuts. I mean, that's like, I
that
can
was
believe
60
how
time.
many, that's amazing how that's grown. But Starlight, the two sons have really driven the whiskey, and they got a lot of really good stuff going on.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend if anyone's, don't go at night. The little roads are a little dark and scary and windy.
Ooh, they are little roads.
Yeah, not in winter because they get icy and snowy. And I'm a little scaredy cat. The other thing I wanted to ask you guys, with your vatted malt, this is an idea I've had talking with other folks
here it comes.
Talking about blended malts, is how about you do blended malts per state or for a holiday. So, you do George Washington, and I don't know, anyone else any other founding father have a distillery? I guess not. But, you do like a state, just whiskeys from one state that you like, you just ship it there. Just available there.
We've talked about that kind of thing, about doing regional blends, not necessarily just of single malt, but we'll also do bourbon blends and rye blends and blends across categories. And we like things that capture that sense of regionality. Like the Southwest in particular really speaks to us, what they're doing with mesquite smoke down there, and would love to play with that.
But we haven't, I think state-wise, there are few obvious exceptions like Texas, where generally to do a blend, there aren't enough distilleries that are doing a similar caliber of things within a single state. There are, as I said, some exceptions. So generally at this point, we're looking more regionally in larger swaths of the country, but still that have some unifying flavor component across the distillery.
I think
we could do it. But if we went to Texas and said, we're a couple of Vermonters, some Yankees coming down to Texas to do a whiskey blend of your whiskey.
We done come to steal your whiskey.
Oh, they love you. I mean,
that same thing. I after going through a couple of tastings from people out there, high altitude aged whiskey is I'm getting more and more up on that, so to speak. I just think that's really interesting, and I want to look into that more.
One of the single casks that we're not tasting today is from Boulder Spirits in Colorado, and that's a Colorado bourbon made by a Scotsman in a Forsyth still, but it's at like 6,000 feet, which is higher than the highest point in Scotland. And we think that's fun. And I don't know enough about the science of the difference that it makes in the aging process. I know more about the distillation because the boiling points change.
Yeah.
But
Liz probably knows.
It's really fun, and we love exploring that kind of thing.
Yeah. And you do taste a difference.
Yeah.
And at least from there, the whiskey is way stronger than anything else we've purchased. Evaporation.
Well, we had Todd Leopold on.
He was stronger than anything we'd had before.
Yeah, and their evaporation rate, because it's just so freaking dry up there.
Yeah.
That he had to plant bushes around his dunnage warehouse to draw in moisture into the floor.
Losing a lot of water. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember the
you-
book was there. I didn't know that was why.
Can you water the warehouse? Is that legal?
I
I
know
mean, it sounds sloppy, but
Cole Keegan, Santa Fe definitely douses their barrels periodically.
Uh-huh.
They'll like spray down the outside of the barrels. 'cause
yeah,
they-
I'm thinking like the lettuce mister in a supermarket, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely are sprinkler systems
Mhm.
Yeah.
in the event of
Oh, in case of fire, yeah. But
yeah.
Yeah. Well, we have a water mister in our Jewel, our grocery store here, that also plays Singing in the Rain when that happens.
You're kidding, really?
Yeah.
I miss it. I miss
It
it.
makes vegetable shopping fun,
Yeah.
if that's
I'm here.
possible.
I miss friendly grocery shopping, Midwest
Yeah,
grocery shopping. It's not like that here.
Welcome to New
On
York.
that note,
Yeah, that
Karen,
sounds like a good time to wrap it up. Did we have any other questions? Or was that the slow proofing one the only one?
I think that was it. We just had one comment from Patrick.
Oh, yeah.
Love the transparency of what you guys are doing, which I think all of us would agree on that. It's awesome.
Oh, no, I think we need more secrets. Absolutely.
Also-
we need
Also,
more.
Tom does mention Cedar Rapids, Cedar Falls, Iowa's.
Yeah,
all about
okay.
Cedar.
I was mostly talking about the ridge part, but okay. All right.
They have ridges.
Yeah, it's very.
That's where those potato chips are
Those
made.
potato chips come
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Once again, Nora and Adam, thank you so much for joining
It's
us.
great to have you guys on. Thank you.
Yeah, an absolute pleasure. So really appreciate you guys coming on and sharing some whiskey with us.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Thanks
so
for
much for
having
having
us. Yeah.
Quick before we go, really looking forward to next week. Our boy Brad Krause is
Oh,
actually
yeah.
is joining the show as a guest
guest.
next week, and we're all really excited about it. And can't wait. So come back next week.
I've had his beer. I haven't had his whiskey. I'm really looking forward to that.
Panamanian whiskey.
Panamanian whiskey. So
Yeah.
Would that fall under your guys' realm if it's made in
North America?
North America or Central America?
Not yet.
Or is it just America?
We got to visit in
Right.
person first. So
All right.
Well,
There
not
you
to
go.
mention, I would assume that it would put the difficulties of getting whiskey off Nantucket really into perspective.
Correct. Yes.
Hey, by the way, Brad, I don't think I got my whiskey yet.
we'll take it offline.
What are you
Yeah,
sending
Adam,
us? You did
thank you
say
so
you were sending
much.
it.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
everyone for joining us.
See you
Cheers,
guys.
guys.
Bye, guys.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Right.